to find out who we are and how we've come so far. Break free from the fears of our making. Just breathe, 'cause this chance is one worth taking. Far from home, we hear the call to break free from the fears of our making.
Ooh. Now have a gaming PC, or at least we don't. We have all of the components for it, and we're going to be going through step by step and showing you exactly how to put a gaming computer together. Now, we did have a little rehearsal earlier, didn't we? And we have had a few people here that have built a gaming PC before, and we have quite a few people that haven't, so I think it's quite a nice mix. And we've got some great components here that we're going to walk through. But don't forget that if you do want to pick up a computer that is pre-built, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Either way is fine. You'll find a lot of people will typically pick up like a pre-built system first and then upgrade it. Or likewise, if you do want to sort of just go straight in and build it yourself, then that's also a very valid thing to do. So a gaming computer is built from quite a few different components, as you can see. We've got all the boxes out here, and we're going to briefly go through now everything that we're going to put in this system. So it all starts with a motherboard. So the one we've got here is from ASUS. It's called the Z370, and this bit is quite important because it relates to the motherboard or the platform that we're going with. But this one's called the Z370E Gaming Edition. It has gaming in it, so it's great for gaming, right? And this one is going to be used with Intel processor. So this one is a i7 processor. It's got 6 cores, and it is the 8700K. And the K means we can overclock this, which might be a little bit advanced, but we will get into that a little bit later if we have some time. But the 6 cores is going to be fantastic for gaming, but we can also use it for things like video editing, rendering, anything that requires quite a lot of horsepower and a lot of calculations, if you like. Also, going on the motherboard, we have RAM. And this is RGB, which of course means it'll be that much better, but it will shine through our case that we'll touch on in a little bit. Memory, of course, is what we use when we're actually going to store stuff that the computer can use. It moves from the hard drive to the RAM to the cache on the processor, and then the processor will then do all those calculations. So this stuff we've got here is Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro. So this is fairly new out, and you can customize all the lighting stuff in some software, and again we might show you that a little bit later if we have time. Then we have the graphics card, which is what is going to be doing our games. If you don't have a graphics card in your computer, it's not going to be very good for gaming. The one we have here is quite a high-end card, so this is going to be able to play games at 4K and high refresh rate as well. So if we're going to want to play maybe Fortnite at 120 frames a second at 1080p, that really isn't going to be an issue with this card. Because it's the Strix edition, we've got 3 fans, which means it's going to be running very nice and cool, which means that ASUS can overclock it out the box like they have done to give you even more frames a second and even more gaming performance. Then we have an SSD, so solid state drive. This is like a hard drive, except the difference here is that it's completely solid state, so there's no moving parts in it at all. It uses flash memory. This means that it's going to be even quicker than a standard hard drive, and when we're booting up games or Windows, it's going to load that little bit faster. Now we also have a power supply here, and the power supply is the bit that you're going to plug into the mains. Then you have to plug in all of the other cables into your computer, and this will convert all of the voltages and make sure that the power that comes into your wall can actually be distributed into all of your components and making sure they work. So the one we have here is from Fractal Design. It is the Integra M. This is a 750 watt power supply, which means it's got plenty of juice to actually run what we're going to be putting in here. Depending on the computer you go for, the amount of power you need will vary. So if you go for a more budget-friendly system, you probably won't need as much power, whereas the one we've got here, it's got 750 watts, and it's going to support something like the GTX 1080 to allow it to function, basically. It's also semi-modular as well, which means that the cables we have can be a little bit tidy around the back, so there's not as much stuff plugged into it. What you'll find, especially with smaller cases, is if you go for a lower-end power supply, all of the cables are pre-attached to the power supply itself, and then you've got to put them somewhere, which is fine on a really big case, but on something smaller, or if you're going for something that looks very attractive, it's obviously not quite such a good thing. And then last but not least, we have the cooler. So this is for the CPU. This is what's going to keep it cool, because the processor doesn't actually have any cooler in the box, so you're going to need something to make sure it works. This is quite a high-end solution. This is the Celsius S24. This is going to be using, this one I believe is 2 fans, yes, 2 120mm fans on that radiator, which is going to draw all of the heat from the processor when it's on and working and you're playing games, and it's going to bring it through to the radiator and the fans, that are going to blow that heat away. It's fairly easy to install, but we'll be showing you all of that a little bit later. Finally, we have the case. This is quite a nice little case actually, because it sort of perfectly demonstrates what most people would go for, which is a fairly middle of the road size. It's not too big, it's not too small. You're going to be able to put all of your hardware inside, and because it's got mesh at the front, it's actually called the Fractal Design Meshify C, because it's got mesh at the front. We're going to get some really nice temperatures on all of our components, because everything inside gets plenty of airflow through the front, whereas a common trend with cases at the moment is a lot of cases will have like a solid front panel, so they will rely on sort of gaps to come in and bring the air through. You're not going to have that problem with this case. Is this on properly? So to actually build the PC in the first place, it's very simple. If you have a pre-built system, then this simply comes with everything inside ready to go. You just turn the button on and it should work out the box. Whereas something like this, where there's nothing inside, all you need to do is unscrew the side panels. I'll move that around so everyone can see. And then inside you'll see that there's not really anything there. And also on this side we've got some tempered glass on the side here, so we can see inside, but there's nothing in here at the moment. All we need to do with this particular case is just remove the screws. And we can do that by hand. And then that's tempered glass, so we'll try not to break that. I haven't done it yet, but it's the first time for everything. And then you can see inside it is just a chassis. It allows you to put all of your components inside. So I think it's probably a good idea to just give you a brief overview of what a chassis looks like, so you know where everything goes. What we have here is a very nice space, very large space as well. This is where the motherboard goes. So depending on the size of case you get, this area is going to be a different size. And this case has a basement at the bottom to keep everything neat and tidy. Some cases won't have this. Some cases everything will just sort of slot in. Whereas this one, you've got that separation there, which makes it a little bit easier to build, makes it a little bit tidier, because you can put cables around the back and you won't see them. It's a common trend. You maybe struggle to find a lot of new cases that come out that don't have this feature, but it's just a nice way of having a nice clean look. And then around the other side, again, this will vary depending on the case that you go for. Here we have a little SSD bay. So this is removable, and then we will attach our SSD. I will show you that later, and then that's where they will go. You'll notice we've got some dangly cables here, and these are what connects the case to your motherboard. So obviously, if you don't have any way of connecting the case to the motherboard or your computer won't do anything. So when you press the power button, that will create a circuit, if you like, to the motherboard, which is what will actually turn it on. We've got a few different headers here. Some of them look scarier than others, to be fair. This one, the blue one, is USB 3.0, so the USB ports that we have at the front of the case. This is what actually makes them work. Then down here we also have some more cables. We've got one that says HD audio on it. Have a guess what that's for? That's for the audio jacks on the front of the case, so both the microphone and the actually speaker jacks. Then these very, very tiny cables, sorry if you can't all see, these are going to be used to actually get the things like the power switch to work. So we have a tiny little connection for the power switch. We have one for the power LED, and these are split into positive and negative, so you have to make sure those are wired in correctly. And then you've also got the reset switch. And then the reset switch is obviously going to reset the PC, but some cases will actually do away with this now, and you just have like an RGB switch instead, because RGB is more important than resetting your PC, obviously. And then also down the bottom, is that falling out? We good? We good? Okay, I think so. Yeah, okay, everyone's mic's really low. Sorry. Ah, is that better?
It's because it was on your shoulder.
Ah, there we go. That sounds better. That sounds worse. Yep. Okay. Well, it's live, so that is so much better, isn't it? So yeah, this is. Should we do it all again? No, I'm joking. Let's not. I can actually hear myself. This is so much better now. You guys should have said, "What's going on? What's going on?" Okay. So we will start that again. Where we were anyway. Is it too loud? Yes, it is. So here we have the hard drive cage. So on this particular case, you can support, I think it's 2 hard drives, yes. They have little quick releases. And this caddy. And you would put the hard drive in here, and then you would lower that down into the hard drive cage, and then it actually works without any screws required at all. All you need to do is then plug it in. And you'll probably notice that we have this little box here. And this comes with every single case. It won't always be in the hard drive cage. It will look a little bit different depending on the case you go. But this is what allows you to actually plug everything in, because it has all of the screws you will need to get everything plugged in. So for this particular one, you only get the screws you need for this case. But if you bought a really large case, you'd probably get a lot more in. And likewise, if you bought a really small case, you'd get less inside. The thing I really like about the Mesh by C is that the instructions are cleverly printed on the box, because they know for a fact you probably won't even look at the instructions. So we get halfway through your build and you go, is that the right screw? I don't want to get the instructions out because, you know, but then you will look at this and you'll be like, oh, thank God. It's fun. So inside there is everything we will need to put this together. I will put this hard drive caddy back. We don't actually need the hard drive caddy because we won't be putting any larger hard drives in. But if you wanted to put a load of drives in, or you wanted to say 3 SSDs, you wouldn't be able to, okay, you would. If you wanted 4 SSDs, they wouldn't all fit there, but you could then just put another one down there and it would work without too much hassle at all. Right, are we ready now to build a PC? I'm getting some nods. Can I get some cheers? There we go. Thank you. Yeah, let's build a PC. And you guys have to be on mic watch. If it starts to go a bit down like it is, I can feel it. You guys need to go microphone. Is that better? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we need a dedicated team of people on mics. That can be your job. I'm sure you can even get paid a salary as well. How does that sound? You get prizes and a salary. You can be the mic guys. Just shout. Don't be afraid. Maybe I should go, okay, that's, yeah. Maybe I should go handheld. Can you build a PC with one hand? It's a good clickbait title. I think it will get some views. Right, so to build a PC, don't touch the case. Once you've done that, leave it. Don't worry about it. It's going to be there when you come back. It's fine. What you want to do is get yourself a nice clear space. So we put this sheet of glass on the floor. Out the way, outside, don't tread on it, it might break, or you get a boot print on it. But you actually want to grab the motherboard, and it will vary depending on who you talk to, but I think it's a lot easier to build on top of the motherboard box, and then once that's all assembled, put it in, because there's just more room, you've got more light, and especially with a black case like this, it is a bit more difficult to see what you're doing, because the light doesn't obviously reflect in as well. So inside the box, I have actually already messed around with this earlier. I cheated a little bit, I'm sorry. Manuals. Who here reads manuals? No one. One person. There you go. This is for you. I would actually strongly advise that while this isn't bedtime reading, forget about the we don't use manuals rule. This is actually the one you want to read, because it gives you all the information about where you need to plug stuff in, and if something goes wrong, it's got a troubleshooting guide. I assure you this is the most important manual you will use while you're building the PC, maybe ever. Okay? Probably not ever. I don't know, there's probably bigger problems, right? But regardless, this is an important thing. Try to have a look at it. If you haven't built a PC before, I'm sure it will help you. This is the other thing you need. This is probably the most common thing. It doesn't matter how many times you build a PC, you will forget to put this in quite a few times, especially if you've forgotten once you've started screwing it in and you're, oh no, and then you have to take it all out again. This is called the I/O shield, and while some motherboards now actually have this built in, most don't. So this actually goes into this large hole that you'll see at the back of the computer, and this just grounds everything. It makes sure that nothing on the motherboard is going to sort of short circuit. It just keeps everything separated. It is, you know, a bit of a pain to remember, but it's not really a big deal. So the first thing you need to do, really, once you've opened your motherboard box, is to plop this in. And it requires no tools. It just simply presses in with a bit of force. Yep, that looks okay to me, I think. Yep, I mean, you know about it if it's not in, because it will fall out. But very easy. Is everyone with me so far? Is this too difficult? Who's, oh, there's someone's gone, it's too much, they haven't really, I'm making it up. Let's go on to the more tricky bit. And I'd like to point out that I don't really believe any of this is particularly tricky, and I think anyone could do it. I've heard of like 5-year-olds that have done it. I'm not recommending you give all this stuff to your 5-year-old, probably not a good idea, but the point is that it's not quite as difficult as maybe some people believe it could be. So you got your motherboard, and it comes in this bag here. This is an anti-static bag because while it's very rare and I've never actually heard of it happen to anyone, you'll often hear people say that you can get static that can break your PC and your components. And it is possible. That's why it comes in an anti-static bag. But there's actually a really good video by a guy called Jay's 2 Cents in the US. Some of you have probably heard of him, where he actually tried this out and he got various different bits of static from like jumper build-ups and stuff while the computer was on, while it was off, started touching bits, and they did make pops and bangs, but everything still worked. So I don't think it's something you need to be overly concerned with, but regardless, we do keep the motherboard on top of the box, not on top of the bag, because it's only the inside of the bag that is anti-static, if you like. So this is your motherboard. I'll put that under the desk because that's annoying me. So yeah, here is the motherboard, and you'll see some big bits on the top. These are the VRMs, which actually will distribute the heat sink, sorry. They will actually distribute the heat, so that's what the case fans in the case do. They will blow air over this, and this will help to keep the motherboard nice and cool. This is where the processor goes at the top. These posts here I've already pre-installed. Those are for our radiator for the cooling, and that's just to save time because radiators take 20 minutes to fit, and let's be honest, you've got better things to do than worry about radiators, right? Or maybe you don't. Who knows? These slots down here are the PCIe slots, and these will enable different devices to work via the PCIe interface. The larger ones are the X16 slots, whereas the smaller ones I think are X4, so that just refers to the amount of speed that they get. A graphics card is going to take up a full slot. This motherboard, you see, it's got some like fancy metal on the top that they call like reinforced steel or something. All these rubbish brand names are all the same thing. Maybe I shouldn't say that. They're all excellently reinforced. They're going to do a very good job of protecting your card in theory of if if you knock it, it's going to be that little bit stronger. But yeah, they've all got some silly names. That's the point I was trying to make. Down here, where it says M.2, if you're using an NVMe drive, you just simply slot the drive in there. That's it. Done. No power, no data cable needed. Really simple. Up here is where the RAM goes. So these slots here, all you need to do is just click these things out, like so. This is where you plug the power connections in. So you've got this very large one here, so you can't miss that. There's also one for the CPU at the top of the board, so you guys can see. Yep. Yep, caught you off guard there, didn't I? And what else do I need to mention? Down the bottom, you've got loads of different connections. Some of these you won't use. You've got things for RGB, that thing again. If you want to plug in some RGB strips or something like an RGB cooler, it will use one of these. And now we have two different sorts of RGB because one wasn't enough. We've got normal RGB, which is boring RGB now. which is just red, green, blue, any combination, static effects. It's all on, it's all one colour. But that's very much last year's news. We've now got addressable RGB, where it can be different colours at the same time. And this will make your PC probably go faster. Emphasis on the word probably. But realistically, it does make your computer look very attractive. So if you're going to have it on your desk, it's important. Likewise, if you're going to put it on your desk and never see it, wouldn't maybe spend that much money on the RGB. But you've got the RGB headers down there. We've also got some headers for the HD audio. We've got USB 3, so for that big blue one that plugs in down here. And then we've also got USB 2 headers as well. And then these tiny little pins down there. You've built a PC before, haven't you? I don't know what I'm showing you. We've got these tiny little pins, you see down here? Do you want to see this side as well? Yes, you do. So you've got these tiny little pins down here. I would play a game called Pass the Motherboard, but I need the motherboard, unfortunately. All these pins here, those are what you plug the power button, reset switch, and HDD lights into. They all go down there, so they are a bit fiddly, and that's probably the main thing if you watch YouTube videos. It's really hard to film this stuff, but that's where it is on the motherboard anyway. And then I think the final thing to mention is you've also sometimes got some ports up here. So because this is a new motherboard, you've got one for USB 3.1, like USB-C ports basically, if you have that on your case. We don't in this particular case. How many times can I say case in one sentence? Quite a lot. We've also got the SATA connections there for the drives. And all the cables you will need do come in the motherboard box. Okay, so that is explaining what the motherboard is. If it sounds complicated, believe it or not, it's not. Because most motherboards have most things these days. You will need to check that it's got everything you need, but otherwise it's pretty simple. So what I like to do is start with the RAM. We're using 4 sticks here, but you can use just one if that's all you want. And this is the Corsair Vengeance Pro, as we mentioned earlier. Now RAM is pretty, it's quite difficult, I think, to break it. So don't worry too much about being really fragile. Or being really careful, I should say, because it's not fragile. And this is DDR4 RAM, and you've got a little groove here, and then a groove on the motherboard as well in the slot. If you plug it in now, it's the wrong way round, and you won't be able to plug it in. So all we need to do is just make sure that the slot lines up with the, the slots, the groove lines up with the slots, and then you just press these little things at the top of the board, grab your stick of RAM, and you press it in. You do need a fair amount of force. It's probably the thing you need the most force when you're building a computer, so do give it a bit of a shove, but you know, you can't really go too wrong as long as you've double checked that the slots line up properly, and then once you've done one, you don't really need to worry about it, because as long as they're all in the same orientation, you'll be fine. So 2 sticks is all most people will use, and it will actually say on the motherboard which DIMMs to use first, and it varies a little bit on a lot of motherboards, but they're often different colours, so you know to plug it into the ones that are the same colours. But here we're using all 4 sticks, so we'll plug all 4 in. The amount of RAM you need will depend obviously on what it is you're trying to use your PC for. For a gaming PC, it's been proven that for a lot of people 8 GB is actually all you will need, but for something that's a bit more high-end, 16 is going to be a bit safer, as it's going to work properly in every single game, but 8 GB should be enough for most systems, I dare say. And then the 32 GB we've got here probably won't help you as much with gaming, but if you do any productivity tasks, if you maybe use Premiere or something like that, any application that use a lot of RAM, then having the extra RAM could save you a lot of time and can give you more usable applications. But for a gaming system, I'd say 8 or 16 is probably where you'd want to go. Is everyone with me so far? Yeah? Perfect. So all things are in. All you need to do is just press them in until you're sure that they're in, and all of these things at the top have clicked, and then your motherboard should look something like that. Nice and straightforward and simple. For the processor, which is the next bit, I'll make a bit of space. So I'll put this to one side for now. Don't need that either. That's a Wi-Fi module. So the processor, I briefly mentioned this I think earlier, but it may have been before we were on stream. And this is an Intel processor. It's overclockable, which means that we can push it a bit further if we need to, get more performance from what it's sort of will run out of the box. But that also means, because it's such a high-end processor, Intel sort of know that most people are going to want to use some high-end cooling solutions. So we don't actually get a cooler in the box. Whereas if you buy a different CPU, you might get a cooler in the box. So you need to check this before you go ahead and buy a processor. But because they know we're going to want something high-end, it's not included in the box. And you do need to be a little bit careful with the CPUs. They are a bit fragile. There it is. As you can see, you can touch it. Don't be afraid, but also do be a bit cautious around it, because this is an expensive thing. You don't want to break it. See, it's very small. You can get some that are smaller, some that are larger. And to fit this, all we need to do is on the motherboard, there's a little catch, a little hook, and you press that out, and then the whole thing will then open up, like so. Now this is the bit where we do need to be a bit careful, because here we have the CPU socket, and this is by far the most fragile thing on the entire, not only the motherboard, but the entire PC. So if you, say, had a screwdriver and you were not messing about, but you touched it, you'd probably break the whole thing, and if you broke the motherboard, you can then break the CPU as well. So the main thing we want to do here is just be careful to make sure we've not got anything lying around. I have known someone that has broken a motherboard before when they were swapping out CPUs. They were using a water cooler like this, and they sort of hadn't really made the necessary precautions, so we say. They had a water cooler sort of hanging out the side of the case, and they quickly tried to move the CPU. Then the CPU cooler then fell down and it hit the socket, and it broke. So that's a very rare thing. That was a professional benchmarker that did that, which is quite amusing, but I imagine you probably will be a bit more careful. And to install the CPU, all you need to do is find the arrow on the CPU, on the processor, and then on this particular motherboard, there's an arrow on the socket cover. That's the word I'm looking for. Whereas for some motherboards, it will actually be on the motherboard. So you're just looking to find an arrow on the CPU, and then you're looking to find the arrow on the motherboard or socket. And then all we need to do is line them up, and then with absolutely no force whatsoever, we just place this down. Just like that. You might need to slide it about slightly, and then with no force at all, you can see that's now in. So that's not going anywhere. But we then do need to close this down. You don't need to worry about taking this cover off. This took me a few years to realize. It's designed so that when you press it down, it pops off. And then we have an installed CPU. No, don't, please don't. So this is what our completed motherboard will now look like. Imagine if I drop this now, wouldn't that be funny? So it's a bit heavier than it was, but we've got our CPU installed, we've got our RAM installed, and we've also got some posts for the CPU cooler that we will be installing in a second. And to do that, all I needed to do was get the back plate that came in the box, and I just pushed that through and put 4 screws in. So I didn't think really that was too important for you guys to see, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've denied you something very entertaining. Maybe. We will never know. These are the SATA cables, by the way, the other thing we needed that comes in the motherboard box. These are used a little bit later, but I will show you them now while we're talking about the motherboard. And these are what connects the SSD or your hard drive to the motherboard. These ports down here. We plug that in just like that. So it's easier to show you now before we do it later. And that just plugs in and plugs out really simply. There's only one way it can go in, but depending on how many drives you're going to use is how many cables you need. If you're just using NVMe storage, you wouldn't actually need any. So now we have our completed motherboard. It's now time to actually get started with the case and get everything put in. There's not really an order to do things in. Obviously you can't put the graphics card in now, but you could put the power supply in if you wanted. You could put the motherboard in. Doesn't really matter. I tend to put the motherboard in because the power supply is a little bit heavier, which just makes the whole thing a little bit more tricky to move about, but not really. It's not going to make any difference. If you're rocking it a little old school, maybe you want to put some DVDs or Blu-rays, you could probably put that drive in now, but you sort of get the point. At this stage, it doesn't really matter what you put in next, but I will put the motherboard in. So, we got our case, which is quite nice and light at the moment. Make sure we've got our I/O shield inside. Then it's time to put the motherboard inside the computer case. And depending on the case you go for, it will either have some standoffs pre-applied or not applied. Now you're probably thinking, what's a standoff? What's he on about? Anyone heard of standoffs before? Couple of years, okay, but a lot of silence. So standoffs, they allow the motherboard to sit in the case without actually touching the case, which means that, again, if you've got a cat running about, and you've got carpet, what happens when the cat touches the case if you haven't put it in properly? We will never know because we're using standoffs, but that basically just stops damage from static electricity and makes sure everything's grounded. So now that the I/O shield is inside, we can grab our motherboard, grab it by the heavy bits at the top, as that's where you've got the most amount of perch, and then you can just drop this into the case. Don't worry about it too much if it sort of sits a little bit funny. As long as you're careful with it, you're not going to damage it. And if you haven't pre-installed, if the case doesn't have the standoffs pre-installed, you would need to screw these in. So what they look like, they're, what's the right way of describing it? They're the bit a screw would go into. So you screw a standoff into the case in the different points depending on the motherboard you get. Because you actually get different motherboard sizes. You can get this one, which is an ATX motherboard, so a full-size motherboard. You can get like a mid-sized micro ATX motherboard, which is, as you guessed, a little bit smaller. So imagine it cuts off about there, so your case can be shorter. Or you can even get a ITX motherboard, which is ridiculously tiny. You lose 2 RAM slots, you only have 1 PCIe slot, but that allows for a much, much smaller build, if that's what you're going to want to do. So the reason this is relevant is because depending on the size of motherboard you're going for, you will have to put the standoffs in different points. So, are we ready with a close-up? Because this bit is difficult to film. I know, I've done it before. But we have different points where the standoffs and screws go. So, I've already put the standoffs where they needed to go, but just to show you, are we ready? This bit's really exciting, guys. Really exciting. Or your money back. Because it was expensive to get in here, wasn't it? It was free, ladies and gentlemen. Red Bull Gaming Sphere, get down here. It's completely free. But that does mean no refunds. Sorry, guys. But we do have some screw holes down here where we will be screwing into, but you would need to put the standoffs in first. I will show you. How about that? It's wrong of me to deny you the standoff. The standoff, that sounds a lot more dramatic. That's not what spaghetti westerns are about. It's not about these standoffs. Probably more exciting. There are these little gold things here that you screw into the motherboard, and then that's where the CPU will sit. I think we've got that. Have we got that? Got a very serious look, so maybe not. But the standoffs are in there. Okay, we're going to put the motherboard in now. So that, again, just slides in, and it lines up with the I/O shield on the back. You'll often have a little case fan cable that's tied up neatly that will get in your way, but it's not really a big concern. And you've just got to find until that clicks in to place, which isn't always easy. So you need to sometimes move the I/O shield a little bit before it will go in, but it shouldn't be a big concern. Okay, looks like we're ready to roll. So we just grab this, like so. There you go, much better. And a lot of cases, this one from Fractal included, they're very kind to you. They know you're going to be a bit annoyed at this stage, and they have one standoff that's a little bit longer than the rest that you can't screw into, but it catches the motherboard in place. So while there's not any screws, should I try it? All right, I'm going to say no, but if you move the case, the motherboard won't come out because it's caught. That would have been funny, but maybe that's, I don't want to end up in a fails compilation, to be honest. Or do I? Good views there. So we'll put the motherboard away, and we will go into our accessory box. Do we remember this thing? Where did this come from? The case. Oh, lively. Like it. And to know which one we would want to use, again, it says on the back. So if you are ever wondering what size screw you need, either look in your case manual or is using a Fractal Design case, it will be in this little box. So you see we've got a few different accessories here. That one I put in there earlier. Again, cheating, I know. But you'll get a few different cables, cable ties in this case, a few different screws. To make my life easier, I've taken out the ones we don't need, so there's a couple more packets in here as well. But here we've got some cable ties to make everything look neat and tidy. We've got some screws for the power supply, and then we've got screws for hard drives and for the motherboard. Nice and straightforward and simple. So we get the screws that we need. And this is where it really helps if you have a little pot or something to hold the screws, because you will lose them. Black screws, black surface, you'll play where's the screw, I guarantee. You laugh, but you will. You'll be playing where's the screw. My personal favourite is, oh no, I've dropped the screw, where the hell is that? And that goes on for a very long time. Now, Newegg have only provided me with a standard screwdriver, which I was very upset about. It really helps if you have a magnetic one, because it keeps the screw in place. So if I'm invited back, I'll be asking for better equipment next time, because this is outrageous. But that sort of works. Maybe I shouldn't complain too soon. What we need to do is get the screw, and then you screw it in to place. Nice and simple. You think you could do that? Because the answer is yes, you can do that, and very straightforward and very simple. So depending on the size of the motherboard is depending on the amount of screws you're going to have. Here, if we can do quick maths, 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. I thought that would get more of a laugh. That is quick maths. Man's not hot. Man is a bit hot at the moment, but it doesn't really matter. So here, yeah, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Okay. I've been told this case needs to move. So if you're on screen, if you're on stream, I apologise. Is this better? I will never know. There's no one to look at. Is this better? Is this better? Is this? I've been told to move the case forward so people can see what I'm doing, but I don't know if it is any better. We're good. Okay, we're good. I'll move it back. I'll move it back. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. I need an earpiece, don't I? This is yeah. So yeah, all the screws go in. Please try and make sure they're all in, because if you miss 1 or 2 out, it can really annoy you later when you're plugging something in and your motherboard's just pinging about. So don't be a bit lazy about it. And something that can happen if you've got a not a dodgy case or dodgy motherboard, but just sometimes the combination of the two means that the motherboard won't always go in that easy first time round. But don't be discouraged, because see, look, I'm playing find the screw. I told you it would happen. That's why I put it on that white bit of paper. Where was I? I've got distracted, haven't I? Yes, sometimes the motherboard won't go in all that easy. But just persevere and don't be afraid to sort of push it in if you need to. So at this stage, we now have, I believe, yes, I think we have. No, missing one. And we drop the screw, magnetic screwdriver, there you go. I told you, I planned that one out deliberately so you'd see the problem you can have. And these are the easy screws. You wait till we get to the more difficult screws. It's more tricky. Okay. So, I'm sure this is riveting for all of you guys to watch, because you cannot see what's going on, can you? Neither can I. So imagine what your view must be like. Right, see, there you go. Ah, there you go. How many times can I say there we go in a sentence? Quite a few times. Okay, right. Now we have a completed case motherboard combo. It looks a little bit like this. Quite straightforward. But you can see now why we did the RAM and the CPU outside the case, because now it's a little bit difficult to put everything together, but certainly not impossible. We'll start with the easiest thing you can do, which is to grab this little cable here, which I will untie from our case fan, and we will connect this to the motherboard directly. And it's the motherboard that will control how fast it goes, so it knows how hot your processor is, and it will adjust the fans accordingly. So see here we have one cable. This is a 3-pin cable. Some are 4, depending on the fan you have. And all you're looking for on the motherboard is like a 4-pin header. So I think I'll show everyone, yeah. Right. I'm starting again, ladies and gentlemen, with a person that has seen this before. You see, just there, those ones? They've got like a little notch on the top. And these are where you'll plug the fan in. Oh. Yeah. you see? If anyone wants to see, can you come to the table now, please? Because I cannot show everyone, that's too difficult. Don't be afraid to get up if you want to see it. So you plug fans into these ones, and they're 4-pin, and to connect it all together, really straightforward. All you need to do is just plug it in here. Yep, that's fine. So these ones here, so they are located near where they think your fans are going to be. So because you're always going to have a case fan here, they put one there because they know, basically. So nice and straightforward. And then that's plugged in. Now we have this cable that we need to deal with, so I will tie that one back up. And you need to check, basically, to see how many fans you're going to put in your computer, because depending on the case you get, you can put quite a lot of fans in, but depending on the motherboard you get, it will vary on how many headers you've got. So you might find that you can't plug in all of the fans you have. On an ATX motherboard, like this one, so a full-size one, I don't think I've ever come across that issue. Maybe on really cheap motherboards, but generally speaking not. Whereas if you're going for an ITX case, you have a lot less headers, you might run into an issue. But if you're using something like this water cooler that we're about to show you, you can actually plug into that directly, and then plug one cable to your motherboard, so you're essentially expanding how many fans you can fit into your system. Right, so now we have this motherboard combo, we're ready to actually cool the CPU. So I'm going to do a Jamie Oliver. Here's one I made earlier. Not come out of the oven, come out of a box. Yeah, get the idea. So this is very much like a car, really, because you have the radiator at the front. If you've ever looked in the front of your car, you've probably seen this pattern. So the way this works is you have a little pump that's normally built into this section here. This actually sits on top of your CPU, and then the heat is then transferred from your CPU into the block through one of these tubes through liquids. So it is often water, but it's got some other things in it because as it heats up, you get bacteria obviously and stuff in there. So it's not water, but it basically is. And then it comes into the here, and then you've got the heat comes through the radiator, and then the fans will blow air through it. So the reason I put this on earlier is because it takes a while, basically. Oh look, Mr. Screw. I've got talent. And the easiest way to know which way your fan is going to be blowing is to look at the case, because they've always been pre-fitted the same way. And generally speaking, I've never come across a fan that doesn't do this. The direction where you see the label, air is coming towards that direction. So if you can see the label, you know air is coming towards you, whereas... Do I have a fan? Whereas if you don't have a label, you have like a logo, then it's going to be pushing away from you. But by using the system of looking at what's already installed, it's very easy to then quickly and visually know which way you've got to push your fans. Because even though I've built a ridiculous amount of computers, I cannot tell you how many hours I've wasted by putting the fans in the wrong way. This is not an exaggeration. I always do it. I never learn my lesson. That's why I pre-installed it earlier, to make it just make sure I've done it right, basically. So the air will come in. I'll move it. The air will come in through the front of the case, through the radiator, and then out of the back. So hot air naturally rises. So if this was upright, the air would come in from the bottom and naturally sort of worm its way up. So we want to work with the way air wants to go, essentially. You can do things a little bit differently, and some people will argue that there are other ways to do it that's better. The main thing really to think about when you're doing cooling is if you're building a mid to low end system, or I should say mid to budget end system, shouldn't I really, then you're not going to have to worry too much about cooling, in my opinion, because I've very rarely seen occasions where like your graphics card will overheat. It's very, very rare. The only time I've seen that happen is when I've had a radiator at the front of the case running off a Intel i9 processor, overclocked, stupid amount of heat, comes in through the front of the case then onto the graphics card, and the graphics card then works 5% slower. So very extreme circumstances where you actually see issues. The main thing to be aware of though is that fans, if it's hotter, they will need to be faster. So if you think about cooling and you think about where you're going to put different stuff, it can give you either lower temperatures or lower noise and lower fan speed. So in this case, said it again, because we're putting the radiator at the front, the graphics card will probably run a couple of degrees warmer, and it might run slightly faster in terms of fan speed as a result, but I
unless you're doing extreme overclocking, I wouldn't worry about it. You could, of course, put the cooler at the top of the case instead, and then your CPU won't be affecting your graphics card. But obviously, the air that's now in your case is from the graphics card, so your CPU will then run that little bit warmer. So you've got to decide which one you want to prioritize. But in a gaming PC, it's pretty much always going to be the graphics card. But in a situation like this, don't really worry about it. Just maybe give it a small amount of thought. Okay, so we will fit the radiator, and the way we do this is by removing the front of the case, because it does come off, just like that. Some cases will have latches on, so do check before, do read the manual. If you rip it off and it breaks some catches, like I've done that before, again, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's not really very funny, you'd be annoyed. But you see the front doesn't quite come off because it's got the cables for the USB, the power, all of that jazz at the top. But you can just neatly lay this to one side, and now you can see you've got this frame. This is where you can fit fans. If you're using a water cooler like we are here, you'll screw into here. But if you're just going to fit more fans in, then again, you could just put them here. In this Fractal case, if I spin this around a little bit more for you guys, in this Fractal case, there's also like a removable section here. So if you don't want to put hard drives in your system and you want a really large cooler, like we've actually done with the PC running, behind us you can put a even larger 360mm radiator in your system. And I will say with water cooling, the main things really that I think scare people is if you're using a water cooler, it will leak. Generally speaking, very, very rare. I mean, it can happen, anything can happen, but the people I've spoken to have said that they'd replace your system if it happened under the warranty, but very extreme circumstances. Closed liquid cooling is, generally speaking, very, very safe, but some people will always prefer to use air, and air cooling is absolutely fine. You'll often find it's a little bit cheaper, but it's not quite as effective at cooling. You've got to make the decision. If you're starting a budget system, I would just say use the stock cooler that comes in the box if it comes in the box, or if you're using something like this processor, then maybe spend £20, £30, $40 if you're in the US on a cheaper cooling solution if you're just getting started, and then if you need that extra performance from overclocking, you can sort it out a little bit later. But as we're going high end, we're going to fit this radiator. So let's think of the best way of doing this. We'll spin this around a little bit. Believe it or not, this has been rehearsed, but I've forgotten what they said was best. I think that there's cameras scattered around everywhere. Let's hope they can pick it up. We sort of do like a test fit. So there's plenty of room at the front here. So this just simply can sit there, and we screw it in from the back. And then we fit the pump. We do it in that order because I find it's a lot easier. You probably could do it in the other order if you prefer, but I don't really see why you'd need to. So the screws we need are in the bag that comes in the cooler box. And again, I've done the, here's one I made earlier just to make it that little bit simpler. I'll put all of the screws on this white bit of paper. But they're very similar to the motherboard screws actually. Oh, I have to spin this around a little bit. Apologies if this means you can't see. All we're doing is just like we are screwing in a fan or something, really. We're just finding the holes on the radiator. We're lining them up on the motherboard with where they need to go. So, which is, where is that? Yeah, that's right, which is there. And then we just put one screw in just to sort of catch it. Turn the PC case. That's my left. Okay. How far left? That's right. No, that is left. Okay. There we go. Right. Right. So sorry guys, you can't see, but congratulations, you guys can see now. We need to move our screws though. I'm probably now in the way. I know. The beauty of doing things live. So try and find a way for this to prop up. So the radiator, it's just 8 screws for this one. It will depend on the size of your radiator, but it's quite straightforward and quite simple. Just do the 4 corners first. Again, use a magnetic screwdriver and you won't have this problem. But try and get the screw in and then just very gently push it in. And then get that tightened. And if you do this in a corner cross pattern, don't over tighten, you'll make sure that they all fit in. You're probably supposed to use the washers, but as I've started like this, I'm just going to go with it. If you use the washers, you should get less vibration through your PC case, or less strain on the actual case itself. It depends what you're using and how big the grooves are. You probably should use the washers. I will use... Oh, no, I won't. No. Now can you see why I didn't show you the complete process of a radiator? It is fascinatingly exciting, and if you do it wrong, you've got to do it 3 times, because you've got to undo it and put it back on. And then, believe it or not, I've done this before when I then realised I had it right first time round, and had to do it again. That was genuinely an hour of my life wasted fitting radiators. So, yeah, fun times. Okay, and then there is just one more screw, and then that is the radiator installed. If you are going for a more budget for a system, honestly, don't worry too much about getting a really high-end CPU cooler. I would focus more on the graphics card and what you're going to prioritize for gaming, but this will make your system run a lot cooler, a lot quieter, and if you are willing to put the budget, I would strongly recommend them. They are definitely worth it. So that's all we need to do for the front. We can now put that back on, and that shouldn't really need to come off again. I've actually already attached the fans to the radiator. This Fractal one, there are those 4-pin cables that I showed you earlier at the very top of the radiator, so all I've done is connected them up nice and simply. But if you were going to plug into your motherboard, then the cables would come round through here, and then you plug them into the different places on the motherboard. Pretty straightforward and pretty simple. Is everyone with me at the moment? I'm probably moving quite quick. Any questions? Don't be afraid. No? Okay. Cool. Glad we're making some sense. Apologies if you can't see everything, but now, there we go. Radiator is fitted. As I said, very exciting. Now it's time to actually get the CPU cooler attached to the CPU though. And this is where you've now got this dangly pump. So try to hang on to that, because you don't want to risk damaging anything. As I said earlier, this is exactly the point now. If you leave it there, you swap a CPU out. Luke from Kit Guru, this is how he broke one of his processors. I'm not sure if he told whoever the manufacturer of the CPU was that's how it happened, but it did. He broke a motherboard and a CPU and had to apologise, because he left it like that, took out the CPU, fell, bang, dead. So, Luke from Kit Guru, you made a mistake, brother. Right, now this bit, we'll need some thermal paste, and thermal paste, or thermal grease, however you want to say it, comes pre-applied on most cooling solutions and most pumps, like this. So here it's just a very small ring, and if you're wondering, anyone know what this is for? Anyone know what this is for? Dispersing the heat, pretty much, yeah. So if you just put this on dry on top of the CPU, it would make contact with the CPU and the pump. But you need something in between, because there'll be air gaps. So this just helps the heat go from the CPU into the pump and then through the radiator. If you didn't put any thermal compound on the CPU, you would see significantly higher temperatures. I've never actually tried it, but I think it probably wouldn't really work at all. I think your computer would hit 100 degrees and shut down, but I'm not entirely sure. If it's not pre-applied, I brought some from home. How about that? And this is what it would look like. It's a bit stuck. It's really simple. I will show you on this manual here. Imagine we were putting this on top of the CPU, so it's probably about that big. All you'd need to do is just press down, very small amount, like that. Just make a little dot, and then when you put the CPU on, and when it presses down, I know this is not planned out, is it? I hope they don't want their manual back. When you press down, quite hard, you'll then see, well, okay, it hasn't here, but it would do. It would cover the entire CPU. So a lot of people will put loads on. They will think that they need to make sure that they spread it. They will get a little spreader out, make sure it's completely covered. You don't need to do that. You really don't. Feel free to. It's not going to do you any harm. It will just more effort, when in actual fact you don't need to. I'm going to do that. There you go. Look, Pro Strats. There you go. And that will never harm anyone now. But because it's pre-applied, all we need to do is make sure we've got our backplate fitted. If you're using like a X99 board, then you've already got a backplate on. Then all I've done is screwed 4 posts down here, and this is what's going to catch the pump. So what I did earlier, I actually fitted it upside down, I think, which was like that. So if I'm going to fit it the right way, which there you go, I am, how about that? You'll just plop it down like that. But I have to say I quite like the design of this Fractal cooler because, they're probably going to ask me to move it again, aren't they? I quite like the design of this Fractal one because the branding is quite subtle and it works any orientation. There's very small things that says auto and PWM, but that's it. So if you have it upside down, you're not really going to notice. And the way this one screws in, just with 4 very large thumb screws. So all you need to do is just grab the thumb screw and very carefully just screw it in. Do this lightly though. Don't just screw one in all the way as tight as it can go, because it will fling the other side off into oblivion, and then you'll have to take it off, and you'll go, oh no, I've risked damaging my CPU. So just put them on very, very loose until you've done all 4, and then you can use a screwdriver to tighten. Very simple and very straightforward. And that's number 4. So now I can let go, and it's gonna live. Now this bit you don't need a magnetic screwdriver for, so we're all good here. So just make sure it's all down nice and tight, which I think that one is. Make sure it's actually on the posts. So see those ones are in. There's still a bit of play in that one. There you go. So you can put a bit of pressure on, but don't try and put too much. You'll know when it's time to stop because they just won't move anymore. So again, you probably could break it if you tried, but I think it'd be quite difficult. And then one cable on this particular power supply. If you get the power supply, this particular pump, but if you go for a different brand, sometimes you'll get more. So NZXT, Cooler Master, they have all sorts of different cables flying off for different RGB effects and stuff. But the Fractal one is nice and straightforward and nice and simple, which I appreciate. And then this just goes to the CPU fan header on your motherboard, or you can put it on the pump header. There's actually one dedicated for pumps, but then you need to turn a setting off on the motherboard, or you get a little warning error every time. So there you go, nice and straightforward and simple. You can definitely make it neater, and in fact I will, just by tucking it underneath the CPU plate. There you go, look, top tip there. If you've got small fingers, you can tuck that in, like so, and then that's now a bit neater. And that can then go at the top. I think, yes, that's in. That looks like it's into me. Okay. Right. Any questions at this stage? Anyone want to kind of have a look? Don't be afraid if you want to come and see. Yeah. So all we've done is just attach this, and there's a little sticker here that we can now take off to make it look even prettier. So the CPU is under there, power cable that controls these fans. So at the top, I don't think you can really see, but I plug the fans just in at the top. So now the motherboard, when it says CPU is getting quite hot, it will not only increase the fan speed, but it'll increase the pump speed as well. Sorry, I apologise, that was my fault. Yeah, it's important, it's important. Okay, so that's this stage now. When we've pretty much got the bare bones of the system ready to go. The main thing we don't have in there is, of course, the graphics card and the power supply. So I'll do the power supply next. I like to do the graphics card last because it's big, it's heavy, and it's right in your way. So try and leave that one to last if you can. But for the power supply, it goes in at this big gaping hole at the back. I like, again, the fact with this case it's like a quick release, so it's very, very simple to do. All you need to do is release this plate, and then this goes on to the power supply. So we'll take the power supply out of the box. Like so. Inside the box we get a very large bricky type unit, and this is our power supply. Better power supplies will run quieter, they will not catch fire, I can't remember who it was, but someone earlier was telling me today they had a very, very cheap power supply and it blew up on them. That's sort of what happens if you spend £10 on a power supply. If you get a semi-modular power supply like the one we have here, it means that all the cables you're going to use come pre-attached. So if you're trying to save a bit of money, but you want to, again, save on cable clutter, this is the cheapest way, and arguably the best way in some ways. You can do it, because you're not paying for anything you don't need. But anything extra that you're going to plug in is here. So all of these cables now won't go on our PC if we weren't going to use them, whereas all of these... Oh. So nice and straightforward. We do need one cable from the extra box. So I will take them out and we'll use them in a bit. And then we also get this horrible American looking thing. Look, this is the UK. What is this doing here? But this is what will connect into the wall. You'll plug this into the back of your computer in here. This is what you need to plug into. Again, fairly straightforward, I think. Random laugh. Always appreciated. Okay, so that's the power supply box. We can move that out of the way. So all we need to do is just grab, and again, they haven't told me to say this, I promise, but I do quite like the fact with this quick release system that it's very straightforward and very simple. So you do need some screws, which are in this one. But once you've done the 4 screws, it goes into your case toollessly. So power supply screws look slightly different to the rest. They've got like a bigger face on them. I'm not really sure why, but they do. I guess it's just so you've got more grip against the power supply. Doesn't really matter, I don't think, on this case, which orientation you choose to put the power supply. So you simply grab the plate, grab a screw, screw down, in. Nice and simple, right? You can fit all 4 screws, or at least you should do. But if you lose one, this is probably the area to cut back, because it doesn't really matter that much. Nice and simple. 2 more to go. Right, so now that's ready to go. You see the quick release plate is not going to move. Now what I did earlier, and what I think a lot of us would do, is we would get the cables, we'd pass it through, put it in, but in fact we've forgotten about that cable that we're going to use in a little bit. So if we connect that now, it just saves us a little bit of bother later on. So we probably should talk about the different cables actually on the power supply, because it's a bit confusing, isn't it? So these ends go to the power supply if you're using a modular one, and then these bits go to your PC. So this weird looking one is one we don't tend to use that much more. Feel free to pass it around if you want. It is a Molex connector, so it's got 4 weird looking pins at the end, if you like, and these are used for things like maybe RGB strips, accessories. ASUS have got a Aura terminal, I think, at the moment, and I believe that uses a Molex connection. And anything that's not rogue, but anything that isn't necessary, I think, for a PC is often with a Molex connector. Feel free, have a play around. I'm getting. I know you want to have a play with it. Make sure you have a look around. And then we have these ones, which are PCIe cables, and we use these for our graphics card. So here we've got 2 8-pin. So if you're using a really high-end card like a GTX 1080 Ti, a lot of the high-end ones will actually use all of these power connections. Whereas if you're using something like a GTX 1050, then most of them don't actually require any power at all. You don't need any cables. And this is one of the things, if you're going to upgrade a gaming PC or upgrade a PC to a gaming PC, you need to check what graphics cards your power supply will allow you to have. Because if you go out and you get a very basic entry-level PC off the shelf, not a gaming computer, and you want to go and stick a really expensive graphics card in, you might find you need to also change the power supply, otherwise it my work. Okay, so we'll undo these cables and we'll feed them through. And the one what we need, the optional one, is this one here, which is a SATA power. So we have SATA power and we have SATA data. It's got a weird sort of L shape to it. So these are what we use for drives. So that's really why it was called SATA power, really, I guess. So things like SSDs, hard drives, also some accessories like RGB strips or something like that, they might use this connection. It will depend on the device you're using, but 2.5 inch, 3.5 inch drives will use one of these. So we plug this in, and here where it says SATA or SATA peripheral, just plugs in, nice and simple. It doesn't pull out unless you pull this bit here. So very nice, straightforward and simple. That just plugs in like so. Now we just need to feed these things through. Now one of the guys that has already built a PC, what am I doing wrong at this second? What am I doing wrong? I'm looking at you. You know I'm talking to you. What am I doing wrong? Yeah, that's a valid point. Some PSUs, they have like a region slider, but that's not actually what I'm talking about now. No, close though. It is actually upside down. So what I'm doing now is the fan is facing upwards, whereas because this case, we've got some breathing room at the bottom, we want the fan facing down. So it brings in that cool air, chucks it out the back. Otherwise it's going to be fighting for the same air as the graphics card. To be honest, this case, if you did that, you probably wouldn't really notice. But in some cases, you won't actually have any ventilation, or you may be using like a weird shaped case. And if you're breathing air in from a, like a solid side panel, it's not going to work. So don't do that. Make sure it's the right orientation. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't really matter that much. And then that just slides in, or at least it should do if I move the cables around. Go. So the cables are now coming out the back, and you can see it's going to start to get a bit messy now. This is arguably the more difficult bit, not because it's hard, just because it's a bit fiddly. So the screws go in like so, and then that's in, nice and tight. And there is also a little thing here, which is to turn the power supply on. Most people, when they build a PC, they will forget about this. They will plug it in, it'll be off, it's not doing anything. They'll get very upset, they will go cry, they'll ask for a refund, and in actual fact, that's all we need to do. So if you build a PC, I honestly reckon 50% of people sitting here would forget that. Because you get too excited with everything else, you forget about that. I think we did it earlier, actually, so it does always happen without fail. So now the power supply's in. You see we have all these cables coming out the back, which looks pretty, well, rubbish, doesn't it? But every one of these has a home, and you just need to put it in the right place. And this is why I recommend getting a modular power supply if you can put it in your budget. If you're just going for a gaming PC and you don't have that much money to put towards it, then absolutely fine to go for a non-modular one. But if you can, and you want it to look pretty, get one that's modular. Then you imagine you've got all of these extra cables here that you've got to stow somewhere. Especially in this case, if you're putting hard drives as well, you might find it gets a little bit tight. But for what we're doing here, I think there's plenty of room for everything. So we will start with the CPU, which is this one. So you've got 8 different pins, and if you're using an ITX motherboard, then a lot of them only need 4. But it's quite straightforward. Most of them are very clearly labelled. All you need to do is tuck that round the back through one of the cable management holes, like so. And it's now near the CPU header, or the where you plug it in anyway, the 8-pin power connection at the top. So I'll do that one for you now, but I will also feed through this very large one here. This is also for the motherboard. We've got two connections that go directly to the motherboard. One's for the CPU, one's for everything else. If you go for a really high-end power supply, then you might sometimes get prettier cables than this, but for most people, this is absolutely the sort of price point I think you're looking at. So you feed this through to the front of the case, and then we'll lay this one down. And this is where we can start plugging some stuff in. So the CPU one, again, something else I quite like about this case is that you've actually got room. But imagine now if you've got that radiator up top. I'm not sure if it would actually fit. It may well do. But definitely fans. If you had fans here, it can then get a little bit tight. But this just plugs in nice and simply at the top. Just like that. And then that's in. It shouldn't wobble. It shouldn't really wiggle. If it's not in properly, you should know about it. And then the same with this one. You're looking for where the catch is against where the notch is on the motherboard. And then you bend this round. Try not to get in the way of the shot. Yes, just like so. So I think for the stream, there you go. Now I'm being a professional. Look at me now. So here, we've got one for the very large cable here, one for the CPU at the top. Nice and straightforward, but if you're working in a smaller case or you're working in a room that doesn't have much light, this is where it can get a little bit fiddly. So now that that's all done and out of the way, we can start to think about maybe the SSD. So we grab one of these cables that we put to one side earlier, and we remember that it plugs in right down here. Once again, plugs in down here. There's like different SATA connections. So we just plug that in. If we just like so. And then we can feed that cable through. Nice and simple, straightforward. There you go. So now we go to the other side and we'll get the SSD installed. So this is a Plextor SSD. It's 128 gigabytes, which is a very good size for fitting Windows, but if you're going to want to put some big games on it, then you'd need a larger capacity. So to give you an idea, Gears of War, anyone know, pop quiz, anyone know how big Gears of War 4 is, the game? What question? 120 gig, this man knows. 120 gig for one game, so that wouldn't fit on here. Good game, but quite large. So we'll get the SSD out of the box. And it's pretty robust. I mean, you can, I wouldn't advise throwing it on the floor, but if you drop it, it'll be fine. Whereas like a more traditional spinning hard drive, if you did that, I would generally worry about it. Whereas SSD, that's going to be absolutely fine. It's just like a USB flash disk in a way. You know, it can take a beating. It can't take, you know, crushing, but it can take a decent beating. The connections are up here. So we've got our SATA data connection, which is what this cable will be used for. We'll just plop in, just like that. Nice and straightforward and simple. And then the cable connection for the power will go in the same way. Nice and simple. But there's only one way of doing it, so make sure the notches are lined up correctly. There you go, see, nice and straightforward. No problems with that. And the good thing about SSDs is they don't really tend to get too hot because there's no moving parts. Which means if you run out of space, you chucked it like that and put the side panel on, it'd be fine. Honestly, I've done it many times, no problem. If you're going to move it about, obviously then it might rattle, but the point is it will work. You could not do that with a normal hard drive, so don't tend to worry about it too much. If you run out of space, just chuck it somewhere in your case. Preferably not in a fan, because that would break everything, but otherwise, yeah, pretty good. Nice and straightforward. So, to install the SSD, here we have, need a screwdriver. We have a little quick and easy place to put our SSDs. Some cases It'll be fine though, because it's an SSD, remember. It's going to be fine. In some cases we'll have quick releases where you can literally just bang, drop them in, plug them in, sorted. If you're using an NVMe SSD, it's probably about that big, so even smaller, and you can get up to like 2 terabyte, maybe even larger than that now, SSDs. Those will go on to the motherboard itself and require no cables. So this is pretty much the sensible option most people will go for. Hard drives are becoming a bit more niche, actually, believe it or not, unless you've got loads of big games, or if you've got very large music or picture library or something like that. I think a lot of people just need a single SSD. Just buy the largest SSD you can budget, probably in this sort of form factor. There's a nice balance between speed and price. Whereas if you get a hard drive, your PC will be significantly slower. You will never ever find someone that has got an SSD in their system and says they would go back. But it just doesn't happen. These things are a must these days, and you can get ones like this for a very reasonable price. I think you can get 128 gig SSDs for less than £50. So if you did want to get that in a hard drive, that would work. But to connect this together, we're getting a very messy desk now. Should we tidy up? Will that make things easier? There we go. To get this on there, they sit just like so, but we do need to screw it in. So the connections obviously face downwards. This is the sort of thing where if you're new to PC building, or you're like myself and are just a general fool, you'll plug things in the wrong way around and you go, oh no, and then you'll have to do it again. So if you are going to build a PC, I would allocate plenty of time, and my main bit of advice actually would be not only allow yourself enough time, but take some breaks. So if you've been working or getting frustrated at something, just sit down and have a cup of tea. It sounds stupid and like you're laughing, and I assure you that honestly the best bit of advice I can give you, because if you ever get frustrated about something, just sitting down for a second helps you to cool down. Because if you've paid, you know, £1,000, 1,500 quid on a computer and it's not being, something's maybe a bit tricky to go in, there's not enough clearance or something, trust me, you just take that break, get a clear head, and it will help you out. Okay, so these to screw in nice and simply over here. I actually normally, to be honest with you, I only ever really put 2 screws in here because it's an SSD and it's not going to go anywhere. But for professionalism, I'm going to do all 4. How about that? Again, you're getting your money's worth here. Have I done what I've said? No, I have done it right. I thought I'd done it wrong then. That would have been funny, wouldn't it? That would have been funny. I can own it. I can own it. It's fine. But yeah, so this is now nice and secure. You can fit up to 3 on here. And this will just go over here. And you'll notice I'm covering up the cable, because if you can cover up the cable, it's then things like this that will help your cable management, just make everything a bit neater. So don't be afraid to do tricks like this to keep cables and stuff out of the way. If it goes in, if I can actually find the right place. There you go. So nice, quick and simple. Then we just need to power it on. If you're using multiple SSDs, that's why you've got like a daisy chain of cables. So you could have it like that. You could have all 3, you could have 2, but you've got plenty of room, and you've got an extra cable in the box if you have something over there as well, maybe, and the cables don't all fit. Yep, so that just plugs in fairly simply. Or at least it should do. Am I doing it right? I'll lay it down. That's easier. There you go. Takes sometimes a little bit of a push. There you go, congratulations to myself. Also helps to talk to yourself if you're building a PC. If you haven't noticed, do just keep yourself amused. Ask yourself how your day's going, what the weather's like, what you're doing tomorrow. Good fun like that. Yeah, PC building does make you go insane. I am a great example of that. Okay, so that's the SSD in. That's all that plugged in. If you had a hard drive, they would go down here. Exactly the same principle. You've got 2 cables for each one. So unless you're using stupid amount of drives, I think you'd be absolutely fine with the setup we've got going on here. But if you want to use maybe 3 hard drives, then you'd need to look at maybe a different, well, you would need to look at a different case because they won't all fit in here. But that's not really quite so normal anymore. The only other cable we have is this one, which is for the graphics card. We haven't plugged that in just yet. How are we doing for time? I think we're doing quite well, actually. I think we maybe 20 minutes or so to finish this. I'm liking those odds. So we'll feed the PCI cable through, like so. But before we put the graphics card in, I want to plug these cables in. So you remember these from earlier. These are the fiddly ones. It's not difficult. It's just sometimes a bit annoying. Just because this one I find is a tiny bit too short for my liking. But that's for the USB. That will just go in there like that. And then I will double check. No, I've shown you actually already, haven't I? And then all of these little cables, other than the HD audio, which goes through to the other side. I'll make this a bit clearer in a second, don't worry, because I know I'm probably rushing over it. It's just a case of feeding the cables where they're going to go on your case. So the reason you do cable management is to make it look pretty and to aid in cooling. But to be honest, it doesn't really make that much difference to cooling unless you've got loads of stuff bunched up blocking all the fans. But cable management makes it look pretty, and when you're using RGB components, our favourite, and tempered glass, then obviously it comes into play. So we feed all of these cables through nice and neatly. Apologise to you guys. You've had to look at the back of me this entire time. I'm very sorry. I like your hat. We like hats around here. Right, now we've got the other side, and Psychic Marcus is telling me that I'm going to have to move around because they're going to get annoyed. Fair enough, but you know, there you go. So the graphics card will come in here, but we will do that in a second. But now all of these cables that we've fed through, we need to plug in. So I can see now this one is going to be a bit annoying to plug in because it's going to be right there. I will do that with a computer lying down. But then these very small little cables that we fed through, have they come back out? Yes, they have. How annoying. The smaller cables that we feed through here plug in at the bottom of the motherboard. You remember I showed you earlier, right at the bottom. And you can use your motherboard manual to actually know where everything needs to be plugged in to actually work. But I will come back round. Sorry about your drink, sir. And then we'll try and plug everything in. So we'll start with a big USB one. We can go right at the top. Make sure everything's in the right sort of order. And you just need to find the port that matches up. Again, this is all listed on your motherboard manual, so while the USB one is quite simple because it's color-coded, HD audio and USB 2, really interesting stuff again, they look very similar. So check the manual if you don't know where they are on your motherboard. They are labeled, but as I keep saying, in a black case like this where it's quite difficult to see, motherboard will show you where everything is and it'll show you what everything does. So if you see something on your board, like a lot of them from ASUS ROG will say ROG extension or ROG EX, you might be like, what on earth is that? You look in your motherboard and it says, oh, well, you can plug in an extension panel. And you go, okay, that's what that does. I don't need to worry about that, etc., etc. So this one is, I can tell now, that one's going to be a bit tricky. So the USB, the problem we're having here is that the clearance that we have for this USB cable is a little bit slim. So the way we're going to get around that is by not showing any, is by feeding it through slightly through the hole and then trying to plug it in directly. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do this on camera for you guys on stream. I'm sorry about that, but it's just too fiddly. So I'm going to have to quickly do it now, and I'll show you when it's done. Because this is a bit tricky, this one. But we should be alright. So it is a little tad tricky to get this one in, but looks like we got there in the end. Yeah, I think so. Push that one in. Yep, looks good to me. So the HD audio, the USB 3, sorry, is now fairly firmly. Yep, that's plugged in. Now we can do the ones right at the bottom. So we don't need to worry about this big PCIe cable for now. Do that in a second. Move that out of the way. Then we've got these very small ones here, and it does actually say impossibly small text that no one can ever read right at the bottom of the motherboard. It's got to be anyone ever used font size 1? Yeah? Okay. Well, if you use font size 1 before and you have a magnifying glass, you'll be fine. But it does say right at the bottom which what each thing is. So I can see where it says reset, but I can't see anything else. But fortunately, I've done this before, so I know where they are. He says now, when this doesn't power on, won't this be funny? You just plug them in, and you don't need to worry about plus and minus unless it actually says plus and minus on them. So power LED are the only ones here that you've got to get them in the right orientation, because all these do is make a circuit. So as soon as you press the power button in, for instance, the bit of metal touches another bit of metal, and then your motherboard then receives a little signal and turns on. Nice and simple. So the reset switch is right down at the bottom. The power switch is above it, because it's nicely ordered into power, sort of on the slightly right-hand side, and then your LEDs are on the left, I believe. So you've got power LED plus and minus. Oh, that's very tight. I think that is minus, is plus on the left. So if something doesn't light up properly, it is my fault. But this is where you'd probably want to look in the manual if you weren't worried about time. There we go. So this is now, you can see we've got some cables plugged in at the bottom. You see how you can't see what I'm talking about? That's exactly the problem. So right there at the bottom, right at the motherboard, we just plug some cables in. It's fine once you know that they're there, and once you've looked at your motherboard and you've seen what each one is, but it's very difficult to see on camera, and even if you follow like a guide on YouTube or text, this is the bit that it's quite hard to photograph, you see, but it is quite straightforward, and you shouldn't break anything by plugging it in wrong as long as you're putting it in the right sort of places. So like you could plug the reset switch into the power, and then your reset switch would turn your computer on and off, because they are just buttons at the end of the day. It's how you plug them in that determines that. We've just got one more to do right at the bottom, but this is by far the fiddliest bit. There we go, congratulations, we now have that in. I will grab the cables back from here just to neaten it up a little bit. They do come out a little bit easily though. These are again a bit annoying because they're a bit fiddly there. But now we have all our cables nicely plugged in, connected, and out of the way. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to talk about the GTX 1080, almost said TI, GTX 1080 Pause. So this is a graphics card. It is very high-end. There are a couple of things you can get that are a bit more high-end than this, but generally speaking, really, it's only the GTX 1080 Ti. This graphics card has been out for around about 2 years or so, but it still manages to crush games like PUBG at 4K settings and stuff. So I actually benchmarked, I think, this exact card last week. Ultra settings, Battlefield 1, average of about 62, 63 frames a second. Can't really go wrong there. And if you're running a lower resolution, you know, it's going to absolutely crush it. Very, very straightforward to install though, and I think this along with RAM is probably the most common upgrade people do to their computer. Notice how I'm using a screwdriver because I don't have a knife to open this. I do it all the time, don't worry, I'm a pro, he says. I'm not a pro, it's not opening. I've ripped it now. Oh well. But this is by far the most exciting thing to open, I think. Especially if you're building a gaming computer, this should be the thing that is the most expensive thing, really, in your computer. So, this is the fun bit. We open up the box. Ta-da! And we get some driver CDs in here that you should never use. And the reason I say this is because if you don't have an internet connection, that's why they provide it. It comes on a CD as well. Anyone remember CDs? Compact discs. Yep. Comes on a CD or maybe even a DVD actually, and you got a few bits of accessories in there. But the bit we really want to see is this, which is the graphics card, which is absolutely huge. There's a fair bit of heft to it. We'll put the box down there. I will probably trip over that in a second. Once again, comes in an anti-static bag, but I've never had any issues with GPUs. They're very sturdy. And look at that. Upside down, look at that. Very nice bit of hardware. You've got 3 fans to cool it. You've got a GPU there, which looks similar to the CPU. Then you've got some memory on there, and you've got some VRMs on there. But generally speaking, all of this is required so that this can run at absolute full throttle all the time. Do you want to do the honors, my friend? I know you do. Go on. Go on. There you go. Did you enjoy that? I know you did. And we can laugh, but I know you did enjoy it. It's very satisfying. So to put the graphics card in, all you need to do is find the PCIe slot that you're going to want to plug it into. It doesn't really matter which one it is. There's actually a spare cable that I haven't plugged in. HD audio, make sure it's lined up properly. On your motherboard is usually the bottom left hand side, and that then plugs in. But to plug in the graphics cards, grab it, nice and simple, and then you'll realize that I've made an absolute terrible mistake here, and the graphics card is too big for the case. But that's why we did one earlier, because we knew something like this would happen. But this is a common thing. This is why you check before you start that everything is compatible, because I've actually genuinely ruined this build now. But we can get around that, don't worry. But what you do want to do is you want to make sure that you've unscrewed the PCIe slots from here, like so. This is quite funny. This is the second time I've had this problem with graphics cards like this. It's quite amusing. But this is not a drill. This actually does not. This will not fit in this case. But what you would do is you would grab the graphics card, and you would find it, line it up with a slot, and you will push it in. But you can see there's not enough clearance the way we've got this arranged with this particular cooler. So just for this particular build, I actually have to remove a fan. I know. What a shame. And I've done this before. I know. I'm sorry, guys. I've let you down. But I don't think that would fit at the top either. It might do. I would have to do it. But this is why these things happen, guys. So that is a problem with extra long graphics cards. You're going to need to make sure your case will actually allow it to fit. And it is a common problem. If you're putting radiators in at the front of the case, then you will sometimes find that things like this happen where you just don't have enough clearance, which is a bit of a shame. But in this tutorial, I don't really think it matters too much. I think we're good. So unscrew this fan like so. If I can grab that screw. Hopefully I won't have to take the memory out as well. This is a disaster area, guys. I think I am. I've got to take the memory out as well. Look at this. I know. I know. This is poor performance, isn't it? And you can see now why we do it outside the case, because it's a lot more difficult to actually do stuff once it's inside. That is funny, though, isn't it? That is funny. Did you expect? Did anyone know that that wasn't going to fit in this case? With this particular setup? Maybe I planned it all out for comedy. I didn't, but let's say I did. Right, so let's remove this screw. Okay, gonna need to use the screwdriver still. Okay, we need to remove the fan cable as well. There we go, guys, we're saved. It comes out, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Now let's try this again. Let's forget what's happened. If anyone has seen that episode of Black Mirror, I've used the memory wipe. Everyone has forgotten. You never saw that. You never saw that. Okay. So what we're going to do now, we're going to install the graphics card. So we've had this all prepared, ready, and some of you may be wondering why there's a fan missing. No reason is the reason. It doesn't. I can't tell you why. But now you can see that the graphics card will fit in, and there's actually a protector on the back as well that you need to remove. Just wanted to show you that. Definitely haven't forgotten. And all we need to do is find the slot where you're going in, make sure you've undone the covers, and it connects just like that. Nothing to it. Really simple. You can actually do this if you prefer with it standing up. It doesn't really matter. So I will show you guys again. Coming from this side, thank you very much. All we need to do, it is a bit more tricky, so I would advise putting it down. What we need to do is just grab it there, find the slot, push it in, and you'll hear a click. Nice and simple and straightforward. If you're wondering what impact it would have to only have one fan, you're not halving your cooling, but it is going to make an impact. So I wouldn't advise doing this, but if this does happen, it's not really the end of the world. I've run this exact configuration before for a while. If you're not overclocking your CPU, you wouldn't even really notice anyway, so it's not ideal. It is annoying, but for these purposes, it's absolutely fine. But a good lesson, I think. Good lesson. Okay, so that's the graphics card in. And now this is starting to look a bit more complete. All we need to do is plug in the power. You see we have these two cables here that we fed around earlier. They just go in over here, like so. Nice and straightforward. There's one where we only use 6 pins, and then the other one over here. We use all of them. You need to sort of slot them in place. It should be nice and straightforward. There we go. And then that is the graphics card installed. We need to put the RAM back. Why is that there? How did that happen? I don't know. So you see you can put RAM in after the fact if you're making an upgrade without taking it all apart. You don't need to worry, but it just means you've got to reach in, and it's sometimes a bit more complicated. Right, okay, so at this point we start to think, are we done? And we need to go through our little mental checklist to make sure everything is connected. Start from the top, really. So first thing, is this fan plugged in? Yes. Is the CPU cable plugged in? Yes. Is every single DIMM of RAM pushed in as far as it can go? Yes. Is this nice and tight? Yes, you get the picture, but just make sure everything is plugged in. The main ones are the power connections. Because I've had a phone call, I was talking about this earlier, I've had a phone call from someone, you know, big burly bloke, not quite in tears, but he was very upset that his PC that he'd just upgraded to didn't quite work. And I was giving him all of this advice, stuff he needed to check, and then half an hour later I got a phone call saying this cable wasn't plugged in. Because it happens. But this is why a lot of motherboards will have different LEDs around the board. that will show you what's going wrong. So that's why you look at the manual, you see. So if you get like a red light somewhere, it might say CPU. It might mean your CPU doesn't work. It might mean that your CPU cable hasn't been connected. You can sort of troubleshoot what's going wrong by looking at the motherboard LEDs. So this fan is plugged in. It's plugged in to the pump itself. The pump itself is connected, and we know. The SSD is connected down the bottom. All of the cables down here are all plugged in, so the power button and reset switch and stuff like that should work. Our graphics card has power, and that, really, other than the SSD, is pretty much all we need to check. At this stage, you can plug it in and check if it works. And if something doesn't work, this is when you would then need to go back and check what's happening. I'll do that in a second, but I want to talk a bit about cable management, because in a case in a configuration like this, you see it's worked out quite nicely, where there's not that much really we need to do. We can make it nice and neat. We can use these cable tidies over here. We can plug them in down there. But realistically, all you're trying to do, unless you've got a glass case on this side panel, is just make it so that the side panel goes back on. And you can sort of cheat if you really want, just by grabbing the side panel, making sure it's the right orientation, and just shoving it on like that. And if it goes in, which I imagine we can get it to go in, it's all most people do. There you go, look, done. No cable management required at all. But if you do want to take a bit of pride in your work, then you can use these cable tie points here with the cable ties. So we could move this one around here, for instance, or over there maybe. We want to bunch those ones up, just to get everything nice and neat and tidy. And that one's now come out. Just to show you, I'd probably tuck these cables in down there, and then I'll actually probably leave that like that. But if I'm going to use that, I might cable tie these ones together here, like so. But this doesn't look too bad actually. This has turned out quite nicely. But if you go for a big heavy build, so my first build was a cheaper power supply, but it was still quite a high-end one, so it was like a cheap high-end one. So it had all of these cables. It was 800 watts. All of these cables, it was non-modular. So all of this stuff you had to stuff down there, and it was really difficult, and it got right in the way. I didn't realize that my case didn't have like a cable cutout at the top as well. So I had the CPU cable, that is this one up top. I had that trailing all over here, and it just looks really horrible because I hadn't sort of thought it out. So the main thing with PC building is just to make sure that you do everything methodically. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. If you're going to get into PC gaming, try to know what monitor is the thing I would do first. I want to drive. Do I want a 4K monitor? Okay, then I'm going to need a very high-end graphics card. Do I want a more basic monitor? Am I just trying to run a 1080p TV or something? Then I don't need such a big graphics card. And then you can work through and making sure everything's compatible with that is the way I do it. So monitor, then the graphics card. Then can I get a processor that will work with that, and that won't sort of slow down, it won't bottleneck the graphics card? Okay, so what motherboard do I now need for that processor? And then what power supply do I need to make that all work? That's the way I think about it. I don't just sort of start looking at parts that look good. I just stay calm about it and sort of work out exactly what it is that you need, and then go from there. So the final thing to do then is just make sure that everything is back together. So we get our tempered glass side panel. Someone can do this for me if they really want. We screw that back on. If you're actually doing this to your personal system, I would probably say leave the side panels off, make sure it works, and that there's no cables like in fans or anything first. Again, if that happens, it's not going to break your PC, but just be ready to flick the switch at the back to make sure that everything is going according to plan. Okay, so that's that on. That comes off. And we'll do the same with the side panel. Right. Yes, it is. Put that flat. There you go. And that's plugged in. And now we have our gaming PC ready to go. Thank you, thank you. Did that look too difficult? Let's forget about the incident. Let's forget about that. Other than that, did that look too bad? Any questions? Please, this is your chance, I assure you. If you want to build a PC, this is probably your best chance to ask any questions. We've got a couple of minutes, I believe, so. With the radiator, yep. Okay, so people on the stream, he's asking, what's your name again, sorry? Tommy. Nice to meet you, Tommy. So Tommy's asking, with the issue with the radiator, how would you get around that? So, going back to the way of thinking of making sure everything works with what you're using, you'd know that you wanted that CPU, you'd know that you wanted that cooler, you'd then find a case that works in the configuration you want it to go. So I'm not 100% sure if it would work at the top. I don't want to take a guess because we're on stream, but this may fit up there with all of the fans. In a lot of cases, you could just do that, or you could get a different cooler. You could just get like a small 120 millimeter one, and then you put 2 fans, and then it could maybe go there. Or you get a different case. It's just about making sure everything's gonna fit. So this case and every case on their website, it would tell you what the maximum GPU length is, and then you'd be able to work out, okay, so that's the maximum length of that, but what about if I put this in there, and you'd be able to go there. Or you could just Google it, just say, in this case, GTX 1080 Strix, Fractal, Meshify C, maybe look at some pictures, and then see if someone's done something similar, because it is sometimes hard to find really niche combinations, but that's the way I would do it anyway. Any other questions about PC building at all? Okay. Right, well, we do have one running behind us. I think a little bit later we're going to be looking at Intel NUC, which is significantly smaller than that, and it's still very capable, can play Doom at around about 60 frames a second at 1080p and stuff, and something that's very tiny. And if you have any more questions, we'll be answering them. If not, maybe we'll take a look at some gaming or some overclocking and things like that. But if you have been joining us on the stream, a massive thank you for tuning in. We're going to take a short little advert break, and then we will be back. This is the point where I don't know if we have taken the advert break or not, so we have to stand here.
There's no doubt PC is the best way to experience gaming, and no doubt that Newegg is the home of the DIY gaming PC. Newegg can help you put together your dream rig with parts Using a powerful PC is important, but having the right accessories is critical to your gaming experience. That's why Newegg is the place for great accessories at great prices. We offer everything from headsets to mice, from keyboards to audio gear and plenty more. We have everything you need to game in comfort and style. Roseville, our house brand, is well known for high-quality products at low cost, so you can worry about getting good instead of your budget. At Newegg, we know great PC gaming doesn't have to be expensive. Newegg, shopping upgraded. There's no doubt PC is the best way to experience gaming, and no doubt that Newegg is the home of the DIY gaming PC. Newegg can help you put together your dream rig with partners like Corsair, Fractal Design and Plextor. Tons of exclusive titles and a fully customizable gaming experience. That's what Newegg is all about. Newegg, shopping upgraded. At Newegg, we take gaming seriously. Whether you're a high-level pro player or a gaming enthusiast, we've got you covered with all the tech you need to level up your experience. Be sure to check out the popular line of ASUS products, from motherboards to high-performance monitors. Newegg carries the complete lineup of ASUS products, so you can upgrade to the setup you deserve. Newegg, shopping upgraded. Need a PC that can fit anywhere and do almost anything? Intel's Hades Canyon Nook has you covered. You can take it to school, or you can put it to work. Use it to power your home theater, or as your gaming weapon of choice. Keep things simple, or take things to the next level. A system that fits in the palm of your hand, powerful enough to run VR. Intel's 8th generation Hades Canyon Nook does whatever you need it to. Powered by Vega M graphics. Newegg, shopping upgraded. Newegg is your home for all things virtual reality. VR is changing everything, from the way you game to how you explore the world. We've been at the cutting edge of VR hardware since the beginning, and have all the best tools to access this new digital frontier. From cutting-edge builds to headsets and controllers from the biggest brands, we deliver the tech you need to push your VR experience to the limit. Newegg, shopping upgraded. Newegg is your home for all things virtual reality. VR is changing everything, from the way you game to how you explore the world. We've been at the cutting edge of VR hardware since the beginning, and have all the best tools to access this new digital frontier. From cutting-edge builds to headsets and controllers from the biggest brands, we deliver the tech you need to push your VR experience to the limit. Newegg, shopping upgraded. Using a powerful PC is important, but having the right accessories is critical to your gaming experience. That's why Newegg is the place for great accessories at great prices. We offer everything from headsets to mice, from keyboards to audio gear and plenty more. We have everything you need to game in comfort and style. Roseville, our house brand, is well known for high-quality products at low cost, so you can worry about getting good instead of your budget. At Newegg, we know great PC gaming doesn't have to be expensive. Newegg, shopping upgraded. There's no doubt PC is the best way to experience gaming, and no doubt that Newegg is the home of the DIY gaming PC. Newegg can help you put together your dream rig with partners like Corsair, Fractal Design and Plextor. That means 4K, higher frame rates, tons of exclusive titles, and a fully customizable gaming experience. That's what Newegg is all about. Newegg, shopping upgraded. At Newegg, we take gaming seriously. Whether you're a high-level pro player or a gaming enthusiast, we've got you covered with all the tech you need to level up your experience. Be sure to check out the popular line of ASUS products, from motherboards to high-performance monitors. Newegg carries the complete lineup of ASUS products, so you can upgrade to the setup you deserve. Newegg. Shopping upgraded. Need a PC that can fit anywhere and do almost anything? Intel's Hades Canyon Nook has you covered. You can take it to school, or you can put it to work. Use it to power your home theater, or as your gaming weapon of choice. Keep things simple, or take things to the next level. A system that fits in the palm of your hand, powerful enough to run VR. Intel's 8th generation Hades Canyon Nook does whatever you need it to. Powered by Vega M graphics. Newegg. Shopping upgraded.
Time, like castles in the sand, tides that pull you in, break from the ties that bind, waiting for a sign. The shadows we cast never look back. Take me out of the past, making it last. Our destiny is waiting. Break free from the fears of our making. Just breathe, 'cause this chance is one worth taking. Far from home, we hear the call to break free from the fears of our making. Call my name across the sea. Waves crash over me. Wake to find out who we are and how we've come so far. The shadows we cast never look back. Take me out of the past, making it last. Our destiny is waiting. Break free from the fears of our making. Just breathe, 'cause this chance is one worth taking. Far from home, we hear the call to break free from the fears of our making. Our destiny is waiting. Our destiny is waiting. Wake to find out who we are and how we've come so far. Break free from the fears of our making. Just breathe, 'cause this chance is one worth taking. Far from home, we hear the call to break free from the fears of our making. Our destiny is waiting. This chance is one worth taking, yeah. Our destiny is waiting. Hold your shine and carry on all your life, and take your time, you're not alone, and feed your fire. We're not afraid to fall, we're not afraid of heights. We're wide awake, we'll never break, we'll reach for the sky. It's when your feet don't touch the ground. Elevate, take me higher. Saturday doesn't mean anything. Come with me. It's our time to shine. Holding tight and letting go all your life. Standing tall on your own. Open your eyes. We're not afraid to fall. We're not afraid of heights. We're wide awake. We'll never break. We'll reach for the sky. Gravity, it's when your feet don't touch the ground. Elevate, take me higher. Saturday doesn't mean anything. Come with me. This is our time. Gravity, make you light of everything. Elevate, come get higher. Saturday, we can do anything. Come with me. This is our time to shine. I sometimes find myself behind. I realize
we are now live and ready to talk about the next section. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you've had a good break. If you're still with us, and I hope that you enjoyed our PC build workshop. But the thing that's really cool about PC gaming is it's not all about these absolutely huge, big towers. It's about the flexibility that it offers. It's about being able to say, I want to run a huge 21:9 ultra-wide monitor, or I want something that is really, really quiet, or I want something that perhaps is very small. So what I've got here is the Intel NUC. And this thing, if you haven't heard of it before, is very interesting because of one very small thing, and that is the NUC itself. So this is a very small computer, but the thing that's so cool about it is just how powerful this thing is. So it's running an Intel 8th generation processor, but it's also got AMD Vega graphics inside, which means that you can run games like Doom at around about 60 frames a second at 1080p on high to ultra settings on something that's this small. So it's pretty crazy, really. But you get it as a kit, and you do need to add a little bit of stuff to it for it to work. So it comes as a bare bones system. You add your own memory, your own storage, a copy of Windows, and that's all you need really to get it set up. Going to do a quick little unboxing for you. So we have the NUC itself, and on the front there's a little RGB logo that you can't see at the moment that would light up, and you can customize this in software. You get a bag of screws and everything you need to actually get the set up. We have a copy of Windows here that you would need to get to actually load onto the system, but we've put that there already. You got your instruction manual, like so. Then we've got our power brick, and the power brick itself is fairly large. It's similar size to the NUC itself, but this is just to keep as much heat as possible out from the NUC. And because it's so big, you can see just how much power this can use. If you get the higher end one, I think it's 100 watts of power, which can give you quite a good gaming experience when it's paired with the right sort of graphics chip. We've also got some more documentation. We've got our power cable, once again, the US version, I believe that one is. And we have a little mounting kit as well. So if you wanted to put this on the back of a monitor, so you could have a nice sleek setup where this was on the back of a monitor, you couldn't even see it, and you can just press the power button, and you basically got like an all-in-one PC, but one that can play games at high ultra settings 1080p, which is really, really cool. It's also got quite a unique thermal system as well, because while this is very compact, it's not really compromising on cooling potential. This thing is actually overclockable, once again, if you get that 100-watt version, which on something like this is pretty unheard of. So the PC you saw earlier, we could overclock it, both the graphics cards and the CPU. You saw how much cooling we had. We had this very large radiator that didn't even fit into the case along with the graphics card, whereas we can get a lot of power in something that is very, very small. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look around the NUC. We're going to open it up and show you what's inside, and if you wanted to do this maybe yourself, exactly what's involved. Around the back though, probably should mention the port selection. We've got HDMI 2.0, and this is going to be used for 4K up to 60 frames a second as well. We've got 4 USB 3.0 ports, type A. We've got 2 Thunderbolt ports that both use the Type-C USB interface. We've got 2 mini display ports, and then 2 gigabit LAN ports, and our power. And this is actually VR ready as well, so you can play VR on something that is as small as this. And if you have done a bit of research into PC gaming, you'll know that VR is a very power-intensive thing. You need something that can run 90 frames a second at all times, otherwise you can get a little bit dizzy in VR. So to be able to do it from something that is this small is pretty crazy. And the other thing is that you actually get some games bundled with a NUC, so VR is really a fantastic option for something that is so small. So if you did want to maybe create your own like DIY system, we've all seen those sort of weird backpacks as well. You could actually do it off something like this, which is really incredible. But what we're going to do now is actually show you what's inside the NUC, and this should give you an idea of how you can build it yourself and upgrade it if you like. It's almost quite similar to a laptop in size. So all we need to do is grab a little Allen key, and we need to go to the screws, and we just need to pull them out. Very similar to how we did with our larger PC, but obviously this is much, much smaller. If you've looked into mini PCs before, I think the main sort of difference you'll find with one of these NUCs is just how much power you've got in such a small amount of space. Like, I've tested quite a few in my time, and you'll find that sometimes they can have hard drives, or they're just not appropriate at all for gaming. That's the main difference, really. You'll find just how powerful this is compared to a lot of other things on the market. Obviously, there are other solutions available, and if you do get a bigger tower, then yes, you can absolutely make it more powerful than this. There's no doubt about that. But the point Intel are trying to make with this is just how a really powerful gaming machine doesn't need to be huge. Like, you look at something like the Xbox One X, which is a very impressive bit of kit. It can't match. It can't match this in terms of sort of volume and size. It's a very impressive bit of kit. As you can tell, I'm now filling for time while I try and undo these screws. But if you compare it to how long it took to actually build our PC, which I think we clocked in at just around about an hour and a half to 2 hours, something like that, you can see it's actually a lot more simple. So we're almost there. So once again, this is like a bare bones sort of system that you do need to add additional stuff to. So you will need to buy some form of storage and some form of memory to actually go in here. It is slightly different to a desktop PC, as we're not using the larger RAM sticks. We're using the more laptop sort of dimmed stuff. There we go, that's the final screw. And this should then remove, you see, very simply. And inside, all we have to do is disconnect one cable here. This is actually for the RGB lighting, I believe, which sort of lights up on this face here. And there's also one screw, but we've removed that earlier because it's quite a small one. And then this should now just remove nice and easily. You see? And then this is what a super small compact PC will look like. So we've got all of the innards, if you like, underneath. So we've got like a main PCB. We've got additional storage and stuff that you will add in yourself that I'll talk about in a second. But all of that GPU and CPU horsepower is actually right at the bottom underneath. So you can't upgrade the CPU, you can't upgrade the graphics chip, I believe, or anything like that. But all the stuff that you can access is nice and easy to access right in front of you, as you saw. It's only those few screws. So what you would do is, if you were buying it from scratch and you're adding your own stuff, it would look something along the lines of, I don't have a screwdriver. This is quite amusing. I'm just going to have to roll with it. If you had the right screwdriver, you would unscrew, or you would screw in the PCIe SSD. I talked about them earlier. If we can try and get a close-up somewhere. Where's the camera? There you go. So it is upside down, but that'll work. Here, this is what an NVMe SSD looks like. So this is a WD black one. And these things are ridiculously fast. They come in two interfaces, so you can get like a slower SATA NVMe SSD, but the PCIe ones that we're using here are full speed, and these ones can get close to around about 2,000 megabytes on the read and write speeds, which is really impressive, whereas SATA will top at around about 525 or thereabouts anyway. So these things are ridiculously quick, and all you need to do is slot them in here. You can put up to 2 in there. I think that's probably a Wi-Fi module or something we've got going on over there. But you can see it's all customizable how you want to do it. But I can show you how you would install the memory. All you need to do is just grab these slots, find where it goes in, press it in. So assuming we had the screwdriver and I'd taken this out and put it back in to show you, that's all you'd need to do. So if you did want to put something that's very small together and you didn't want it to be very difficult at all, then the NUC is quite a cool way to do it. So we'll put that back together now. Nice and simple, that one just goes in there. One little flathead cable. If we had a monitor and stuff, I'd be able to show you as well how you can customize all the lighting on the plate. I'm not a massive huge fan of RGB lighting these days, just because it is so overdone. But even I have to admit that this thing, the logo when it lights up, does look quite eye-catching. And I think we can sort of move around to a few different shots around the room, because we actually do have some NUCs set up in this very space over by the Red Bull logo, where you can see people actually playing on these things now. And while you're not going to get GTX 1080 Ti levels of performance, the fact that you can get something that's this small, maybe stick it on the back of your monitor, and actually get ridiculous levels of gameplay is quite impressive. So that is the Intel NUC. I do want to, while we're on this topic, talk maybe a little bit more about if you're buying a gaming computer, what sort of size you should go for, because I think that is obviously quite topical as we're talking about small form factor PCs. And the beauty of it is there is that much choice. You can work with the space you've got. So a lot of people want to put a computer on their desks, and the downsides to that are that you're closer to the components, you're going to hear more things. It's going to be a big thing on your desk as well, so you might be able to fit you might not be able to fit speakers or something on your desk if you're putting it on there. But you can actually see what's going on, and when you've got all this RGB lighting and things like that, it's something a lot of people like. And I actually put my PC under my desk to minimize on noise, and it's probably like the top thing people comment on my YouTube channel about that they don't like. There's like, why do you have this PC and you put it under your desk? But again, the beauty of it is you can sort of make it work how you want it to. Size-wise, the performance obviously is going to be impacted by the volume, if you like, of the computer you go for. But if you're building it yourself, you can obviously pick which components to put in a smaller space. The main restrictions are that you will be able to, you'll have to go for smaller components if you go for a smaller case. You'll also need a motherboard that is a little bit smaller, so it'll lose out on certain features. So one of those ITX motherboards that we talked about earlier, you will then lose 2 RAM slots and you lose some PCIe slots. If you go for something a little bit bigger, like the Micro ATX motherboards, then it's sort of a nice middle ground between the two, but you're still missing out on certain features. You don't have as many PCIe slots, but you can still put 2 graphics cards in there if that's your bag. But I think a lot of people get quite sort of hung up and always try to go for like the largest computer case that they can afford, because larger cases obviously are more expensive, and so a lot of the time people think that bigger is always better. But I think the Meshify C that we had earlier is quite a nice practical size. Obviously we might have needed something slightly bigger for that precise configuration that we went for, but it's an interesting thing, and more people are going for smaller computer cases and smaller computers, because there isn't that much of a compromise like there used to be. You might get a few components that run slightly warmer or slightly louder, but the pro side is it is a lot easier to move around. And obviously, what was I talking about? And yeah, so it's a lot easier to move around, and you can have it on your desk, and it's not actually going to be this massive tower in your way and taking up a load of space. And I think that is the NUC talked about. I think we have talked about size and all of that stuff. So I want to open this up now. If we have any more general sort of PC gaming questions or anything that you want to ask, this is definitely now your time. Any questions at all? No. Okay then. Well, a massive thank you for everyone for checking out this stream and everyone that has actually come here. I honestly appreciate you guys sticking around as well. I hope it's been useful. I hope if you have been in the market, if you like, for a gaming PC, or you're wanting to even get a new laptop or anything like that, this sort of thing has given you a bit more insight. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of computers and gaming and stuff, and we're all obviously told, aren't we, when we're in school, that gaming and stuff is all a bit, you know, why would you want to do that? But it's stuff we love, and it gives you a hobby, and the fact that you can customize and make it your own and stuff, I think is something that's honestly really cool. I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the sponsors as well that has actually helped put this together, and I'm going to cheat, I'm afraid. I have a bit of paper, guys. I'm going to have to read it off the paper because I don't want to make a mistake here. But to everyone from the Red Bull gaming sphere for putting this event on, and the fact that you can just come down here free of charge and play games on some stupidly high-end computers and monitors and stuff, I think is fantastic. So if you're not here, get down here, and if you are here, come down here again. I hope you have enjoyed it. Obviously, a massive thank you to Newegg for actually making this particular evening happen with all of the PC gaming and PC build stuff. It was their idea. They approached me for this, so I'm glad I could have been a part of it. If you do want to get a pre-built PC via Newegg, though, you can go with ABS computers. That you'll have basically the computer I made, but actually cable managed properly. Someone complained about my cable management. I don't have time, man. This is tough, all right? But if you want it immaculately cable managed, you can get it from Newegg and ABS computers. And then obviously the sponsors that actually provided all the parts we needed for this particular segment. So obviously for the NUC, it's Intel, but also Intel for the CPU. A massive thank you to ASUS ROG for the graphics card, motherboards, all of those good stuff. Fractal Design, where we had the case, the cooler, and the power supply. Plextor for the SSD. Once again, SSDs really important. No matter what brand you go for, please get an SSD. It will make your system so much quicker. I assure you will not forget it. Corsair for that super bright RGB memory that we didn't get to see, sadly, in its full glory, but I assure you it looks awesome. Obviously, Oculus for the VR. We've got some VR down here at the Red Bull Gaming Sphere. So if you've never used VR, we know someone has not used VR before, very excited about trying it out. This is definitely a cool place to come. And a thank you to me for turning up. I appreciate myself coming down here. But no, a massive thank you for everyone for coming. And I guess we'll see you all very soon. Thank you.
You.